The mess hall of the starship Starwind buzzed with voices and laughter. Blue-skinned Kethari soldiers sat at metal tables, their forearms moving as they ate and talked. Tall, thin Zephyrians picked at their food with long fingers, their large eyes glowing softly in the dim light. The air smelled of different alien foods, mixed together. Jake Morrison sat alone at a corner table. He was a human, shorter than most of the other soldiers around him. His brown hair was cut short, and his face showed lines from years of hard work. He ate his meal slowly, listening to the conversation at the nearby tables. "Did you hear what the human in engineering said yesterday?" asked Veltar, a large Gethari with dark blue skin and scars across his face. His voice was deep and rough. He claimed his people once fought giant beasts with nothing but wooden sticks. The other aliens laughed loudly, their different voices mixed together in a chorus of mockery. "Wooden sticks?" said Zixina, a female Zephyrian with silver markings on her face. "How could anyone fight with wood? My people have used energy weapons for thousands of years." "That's not the best part," Veltar continued, his mandibles clicking as he spoke. "The human said his ancestors held mountain passes against thousands of enemies. Just a few hundred humans stopping entire armies." More laughter filled the room. Jake continued eating, his face showing no emotion. "These Earth stories get more ridiculous each time," said Corton, another Kethari with bright green eyes. "Yesterday, one of them told me about pilots who flew broken ships into enemy vessels on purpose. They called it kamikaze or something. Suicide." "Attacks?" Zixina shook her head. "No intelligent species would waste soldiers like that. It makes no sense." Jake took a sip of his water and glanced around the room. More aliens were joining the conversation now. A group of insect-like Threx soldiers shittered their agreement. Even some of the normally quiet Sylvan Tree people nodded their branch-like heads. "The humans have such wild imaginations," said Veltar. "They tell stories about warriors who could fight for days without sleep, about soldiers who refused to surrender even when facing certain death, about a species that survived ice ages and plagues on their home planet." "Earth sounds like a terrible place," said Corton. "No wonder they make up heroic stories. Reality must be too depressing." Jake finished his meal and stood up to leave, but Veltar wasn't done. "Wait, Morrison," the big alien called out. "You're human. Tell us about these legendary warriors of Earth." Jake stopped and turned around. The entire mess hall had gone quiet. Dozens of alien eyes looked at him, waiting for his response. "I don't have any stories," Jake said simply. His voice was calm and steady. "Come on," Veltar pressed. "Every human we've met has these amazing tales. What about the warriors who held the mountain passes? The pilots who flew suicide missions? The soldiers who never gave up?" Jake looked at the alien commander for a long moment. "I wouldn't know anything about that," he said finally. "Of course you wouldn't," Veltar laughed. "Because they're all made up. Humans tell these stories to make themselves feel important. But look at you. You're just ordinary soldiers, like the rest of us." The other aliens joined in the laughter again. Jake nodded once and walked toward the exit. "Morrison," Veltar called out again, "don't take it personally. We all need our myths and legends. Even children's stories have their place." Jake paused at the doorway but didn't turn around. "Sure," he said quietly and left the room. The laughter continued behind him as he walked down the corridor. His boots made soft sounds on the metal floor. The ship's lights cast long shadows as he headed toward his quarters. But Jake didn't go to his room. Instead, he made his way to the observation deck. The large window showed the stars outside, bright points of light against the black of space. He stood there for a while, looking out at the universe. The door opened behind him. Dr. Amy Rodriguez entered, carrying a datapad. She was a small woman with dark hair and kind eyes. "Heard the usual. Show in the mess hall," she said, standing next to Jake at the window. "They're just having fun," Jake replied. "At our expense," Amy said. "They think we're all talk and no action." Jake was quiet for a moment. "Maybe that's better." "Better? Jake, these aliens have no idea what humans are capable of. They think Earth's history is just fantasy." "And what would happen if they knew the truth?" Jake asked. "Would it change anything?" Amy looked at him. "It might change how they see us, how they treat us." "We're not here to impress anyone," Jake said. "We're here to do our job." "Your grandfather would have agreed with that," Amy said softly. Jake smiled slightly. "He always said the loudest soldiers are usually the ones who've seen the least fighting." "And the quiet ones?" "The quiet ones just do what needs to be done." They stood in comfortable silence, watching the stars. Somewhere in the distance, enemy ships were moving toward their next battle. The Vorthan Empire was pushing deeper into Alliance space, and soon the crew of the Starwind would face their first real test dot in the mess hall. The aliens continued their jokes about human myths. They had no idea that one of those mythical warriors stood on their ship, quietly preparing for whatever came next. Jake Morrison had learned long ago that action spoke louder than words. Soon, very soon, his crewmates would learn that lesson too. The ship's computer hummed quietly in the data center. Green lights blinked as information flowed through the system. In the depths of the Starwind's electronic brain, files marked classified contained the truth about Staff Sergeant Jake Morrison. Captain Lisa Campbell sat in her private office, reading through crew records. The human commander had short blonde hair and sharp blue eyes. She stopped when she reached Jake's file. The document was thick with medals, commendations, and battle reports. "Computer, display Morrison's service record," she said aloud. "The holographic." Screen lit up with Jake's military history. Lisa read through it slowly, shaking her head in amazement. Jake Morrison had joined the Alliance military 8 years ago. His first assignment was Proxima Station, a mining outpost near the edge of human space. When Vorthan raiders attacked, most of the defense force was killed in the first wave. Jake had been a young private then, fresh out of training. The computer showed video footage from the station's security cameras. Jake moved through the corridors like a ghost, using every piece of cover. He had held the main corridor for 18 hours straight, preventing the Vorthans from reaching the civilian evacuation ships. The report said he had been wounded 3 times during the battle. Plasma burns on his left arm, shrapnel in his leg, and a concussion from an explosive blast. But he never left his position. Not until the last transport ship had safely jumped to hyperspace. 300 civilians saved, Lisa read aloud. 1 soldier holding the line, but that was just the beginning. Jake's next major action was the Battle of Titan's Edge. A Vorthan dreadnought had broken through the Alliance fleet's defensive line. The massive enemy ship was heading straight for a populated moon with 2 million people. Lisa watched the combat footage with growing respect. Jake had volunteered for a suicide mission to spacewalk across the enemy ship's hull and plant explosives in its main reactor. The journey was 2 kilometers across the surface of a ship that was actively firing at Alliance vessels. The video showed Jake in his spacesuit, moving carefully across the enemy hull. Laser fire lit up the darkness around him. Several times, he had to flatten himself against the ship's surface as weapons fired overhead. It took him 43 minutes to reach the reactor. The explosion that followed destroyed the dreadnought completely. Jake had barely made it back to his escape pod before the ship broke apart. The Alliance called it the most daring single-person assault in military history. "And he never talks about it," Lisa said to herself. The computer file continued. "Jake had fought in 7 major battles after Titan's Edge. Each time, he had performed beyond normal human limits. But he always wrote his reports in simple, basic language. No dramatic descriptions, no requests for recognition. Lisa pulled up Jake's psychological profile. The ship's doctor had noted that Jake was unusually calm under stress and shows no signs of trauma despite extensive combat experience. His personality tests marked him as introverted but reliable and natural leader, though reluctant to command. The most interesting note came from Jake's former commanding officer on Earth. Colonel Frank Baker had written, "Morrison represents the best of human military tradition. He fights not for glory or recognition, but because it's the right thing to do. His grandfather raised him well." Lisa looked up information about Jake's grandfather. Henry Morrison had been a soldier in an ancient Earth war called Vietnam. He had taught Jake that true warriors didn't boast about their battles. They simply did what needed to be done, then moved on to the next challenge. Meanwhile, in the ship's training room, Jake worked out alone. He lifted weights that would challenge even the stronger alien species. His movements were smooth and controlled, showing years of discipline. Sweat covered his face, but his breathing remained steady. The door opened, and Dr. Amy Rodriguez entered. She carried a medical scanner and a worried expression. "Jake, I need to run some tests," she said. "I'm fine," Jake replied, not stopping his exercise. "That's not what this is about." Amy sat down on a nearby bench. "The alien crew is still talking about us, about humans in general." Jake finished his set and turned to face her. "And they think we're weak. They think our stories are just fairy tales." "Maybe that's better," Jake said, toweling off his face. "How is that better?" Jake was quiet for a moment. "Amy, what do you think would happen if these aliens knew what humans were really capable of?" "They'd respect us more, or they'd fear us." Jake sat down next to her. "Fear leads to problems. Right now, they see us as harmless storytellers. That's not the worst thing." Amy shook her head. "But it's not true. Look at you. You've saved more lives than any 10 soldiers combined. You've fought battles that would be impossible for most species." "I've done my job," Jake said simply. "Your job?" "Jake, you held off an entire enemy assault force for 18 hours. You walked across a hostile ship's hull while under fire. You've led rescue missions that saved hundreds of people. And talking about it won't bring back the people we couldn't save." Amy looked at him with understanding. She had treated Jake after several of his missions. She had seen the physical wounds, but she also knew about the emotional ones. Every life he saved came with the memory of lives he couldn't save. "Your grandfather was right," she said softly. "The best warriors are the quiet ones." Jake nodded. "He used to say that anyone can be brave for a few minutes, but real courage is doing your job every day, even when nobody's watching. And even when people make fun of you, especially then." They sat in comfortable silence for a moment. Through the training room's window, they could see stars moving past as the ship traveled through space. "The aliens don't know," Amy said finally. "No." "What?" "That they're sitting next to legends. That every human on this ship has stories they'd call impossible." Jake stood up and picked up his towel. "Good. Let's keep it that way." "Why?" "Because when the time comes, they'll learn the truth anyway. And it'll mean more if we show them instead of telling them." Amy watched him head toward the door. "Jake?" He stopped and turned back. "What if the time comes sooner than we think?" Jake looked at her for a long moment. "Then we'll do what humans always do, which is whatever it takes." As Jake left the training room, Amy remained behind. She thought about the alien crew's laughter in the mess hall. They had no idea that the quiet human they dismissed as ordinary was actually one of the most dangerous warriors in the galaxy. But Jake was right. They would learn the truth eventually. And when they did, it would change everything. The bridge of the Starwind was filled with tension. Captain Lisa Campbell stood at the center, watching the main screen. Dozens of red dots appeared, showing enemy ships moving toward them. The Alliance fleet had arrived at Kepler 442b, but the situation was much worse than anyone had expected. "Captain," called out Lieutenant Ben Torres from the communications station, "we're getting reports from the forward scouts. The Vorthan fleet is 3 times larger than intelligence predicted." Lisa felt her stomach drop. "How many ships?" "Over 200, Mom, including at least 15 heavy cruisers and 3 dreadnoughts." The bridge fell silent. The Alliance had brought 60 ships to defend the mining colony. They were badly outnumbered. "Sir," said the tactical officer, a Cathari named Grixtel, "long-range sensors are detecting energy signatures from the Shadowclaw Regiment." Lisa's blood ran cold. The Shadowclaw Regiment was the Vorthan Empire's elite fighting force. They were warriors bred and trained from birth for one purpose: conquest. Each Shadowclaw soldier was worth 10 regular troops. "All hands, battle stations," Lisa announced over the ship's communication system. "This is not a drill. Enemy contact in 30 minutes." Alarms began blaring throughout the ship. The lights changed to red, casting everything in an ominous glow. Crew members ran through the corridors, heading to their assigned positions. In the mess hall, Veltar jumped up from his table. The big Cathari had been eating lunch when the alarm sounded. His 4 hands shook as he tried to put on his combat gear. "This is it," he said to his squad. "Real combat. Not training exercises." The other alien soldiers around him looked nervous. Despite their earlier confidence, none of them had faced actual battle before. The Starwind was a new ship with a mostly green crew. Jake Morrison appeared in the doorway, already dressed in his combat armor. His pulse rifle was slung across his back, and his belt held extra ammunition and grenades. He looked calm and ready. "Morrison," Veltar called out, "where's Shafir? Don't you understand what's happening?" Jake looked at the alien commander. "I understand perfectly. The Shadowclaw Regiment is out there. Elite warriors who've never been defeated in battle." "I heard," Jake said simply. "And you're not worried?" Jake was quiet for a moment. "Worry doesn't help anyone. Focus on your job." Before Veltar could respond, the ship shuddered violently. The lights flickered, and several crew members were thrown to the floor. Emergency. Lighting kicked in, bathing everything in a dim red glow. "Direct hit to the port side," came the announcement from the bridge. "All damage control teams to stations." Another impact hit the ship, harder this time. The artificial gravity flickered, making everyone float for a few seconds before slamming back down. Sparks flew from damaged control panels. "Hull breach on Deck 7, announced the computer. "Emergency bulkhead sealing." Jake was already moving. He ran toward the damaged section while other crew members hesitated. His boots pounded against the metal floor as he navigated through the darkened corridors. Behind him, he could hear Veltar shouting orders. But the Cathari's voice was shaking. The alien commander was experiencing real terror for the first time in his life. Jake reached the damaged section and found chaos. Water pipes had burst. Sparking electrical systems were throwing dangerous. Arcs of energy, and the hull breach was slowly growing larger. 3 crew members were trapped under fallen debris. "Help me," called out Zixina, the Zephyrian from the mess hall. She was pinned under a heavy metal beam, her thin frame unable to lift it. Jake grabbed one end of the beam and lifted it easily. His human muscles, evolved on a high-gravity world, were stronger than they appeared. Zixina crawled out, her large eyes wide with surprise. "How did you do that?" she asked. "Practice," Jake said, already moving to help the next trapped crew member. The ship shook again as another enemy weapon hit home. This time, the lights went out completely. Emergency power tried to kick in, but failed. They were in complete darkness, except for the sparks from damaged systems. "Everyone stay calm, Jakes." Voice cut through the panic. "Follow my voice. We're going to get out of here." In the darkness, the alien crew members couldn't see Jake's face, but they could hear the confidence in his voice. He moved through the damaged section like he could see perfectly, guiding them around obstacles and dangers. "There's a fire in the next corridor," Jake announced. "We need to go around." "How can you tell?" asked Corton, the young Cathari. "I can smell it," Jake said, "and feel the heat." They followed Jake through the maze of damaged corridors. Several times, he stopped them just before debris fell from the ceiling. He seemed to know where every danger was before it happened. "Bridge. To all stations," came Captain Campbell's voice over the communication system. "We're being boarded. Vorthan forces have breached the hull near the engine room." Jake stopped moving. The alien crew members could hear him breathing in the darkness. But he seemed to be thinking. "What do we do?" asked Zixina. "You get to the safe areas," Jake said. "I'm going to the engine room." "That's suicide," Veltar's voice came from behind them. The Cathari commander had finally caught up. "The Shadow Claw warriors are the most dangerous fighters in the galaxy. So I've heard," Jake said quietly. "Morrison, you can't face them alone. We need to work together." Jake was quiet for a moment. "Commander, get these people to safety." "That's an order." "You can't give me orders," Veltar said. "I outrank you." "Then act like it." Jake's voice was calm but firm. "Protect your crew. Lead them to the emergency shelters." Without another word, Jake disappeared into the darkness. The alien crew members could hear his footsteps echoing down the corridor, getting quieter until they faded away completely. "Should we follow him?" asked Corton. Veltar stood in the darkness, his four hands clenched into fists. For the first time in his life, he was truly afraid. But he was also beginning to understand something about the quiet human who had just walked into certain death. "No," Veltar said finally. "We do what he said. We protect the crew." As they moved toward the emergency shelters, the alien soldiers could hear the sounds of battle echoing through the ship. Energy weapons fired, metal clanged against metal, and occasionally they heard the terrifying roar of Vorthan warriors. But through it all, one sound was missing. Any cry of pain or fear from Jake Morrison. The quiet human had walked into hell itself, and he was fighting like the legendary warriors of Earth that his crewmates had mocked just hours before. The storm had broken, and the truth about humanity was about to be revealed. The engine room of the Starwind was a war zone. Sparks flew from damaged control panels, and the smell of burning metal filled the air. 3 Shadowclaw warriors moved through the chaos like deadly ghosts. Each one was over 7 feet tall, with black armor that seemed to absorb light. Their weapons hummed with deadly energy. Jake Morrison crouched behind a massive engine component, watching the enemy soldiers. His pulse rifle was ready, and his breathing was steady. He had faced worse odds before, but never alone on a damaged ship. The first Shadowclaw warrior rounded the corner, his weapon raised. Jake fired 3 precise shots. The alien's energy shield absorbed the first 2, but the third found its mark. The warrior fell backward, his armor smoking. The other 2 Shadowclaw soldiers roared in anger. They had never seen one of their comrades fall so quickly. They spread out, trying to surround Jake's position. Jake rolled to his left, coming up behind a different piece of machinery. He fired again, forcing the aliens to take cover. His movements were smooth and calculated, like he had done this 1,000 times before. In the emergency shelter, The alien crew members huddled together. They could hear the battle raging throughout the ship. Energy weapons fired. Explosions echoed through the corridors, and the hull continued to groan under. The stress of combat. "How is he doing this?" asked Zixina, her large eyes wide with fear and amazement. Veltar shook his head. "I don't understand. One human against Shadowclaw warriors? It should be impossible." Dr. Amy Rodriguez sat with the wounded crew members, treating their injuries. But she was also listening to the sounds of battle. She knew those sounds well. She had heard them many times before, whenever Jake fought. "You want to know how he's doing it?" Amy said, not looking up from her patient. The alien soldiers turned to her. "Jake Morrison isn't just any human," Amy continued. "He's fought in 7 major battles. He held Proxima Station alone for 18 hours. He destroyed a Vorthan dreadnought by himself." "That's impossible," said Corton. "No one person could do those things." "Look around you," Amy said. "Listen to what's happening. Does it sound impossible now?" Another explosion shook the ship. This time, they heard something new, the sound of Vorthan warriors screaming in pain and fear. "The siege of Proxima Station," Amy said, working on a wounded Threx soldier. Jake was a private then, just 20 years old. When the Vorthans attacked, most of the defense force was killed in the first wave. Jake found himself alone in the main corridor, the only thing standing between the enemy and 300 civilians. The alien crew members listened in stunned silence. "He fought for 18 hours straight," Amy continued. "Wounded 3 times. Plasma burns, shrapnel, a concussion. But he never left his position. Every time the Vorthans tried to advance, he stopped them." "One human against an entire assault force?" Veltar's voice was barely a whisper. "One human doing what needed to be done," Amy corrected. "That's what we do. That's what we've always done." The sounds of battle were getting closer. Jake was moving through the ship, pushing the Shadowclaw warriors back. But there were more of them now. The alien boarding party was larger than expected. "The Battle of Titan's Edge," Amy said, starting to treat another wounded crew member. "A Vorthan dreadnought broke through our lines. It was heading straight for a moon with 2 million people." "I remember that battle," said Grigstall, the Kethari tactical officer. "The dreadnought was destroyed, but we never learned how." "Jake volunteered for a suicide mission," Amy said. "He spacewalked across the enemy ship's hull while it was actively firing at our fleet. 2 kilometers across the surface of a hostile vessel. The alien soldiers stared at her in disbelief. He planted explosives in the main reactor," Amy continued. "The ship was destroyed completely. Jake barely made it back to his escape pod before the explosion." "That's not possible," said Zixina. "No organic being could survive that kind of mission." Jake did, and he wrote his report in 3 sentences. "Mission completed. Enemy vessel destroyed. Requesting permission to return to duty." The ship shuddered again, but this time it was different. The sounds of battle were changing. Instead of the roar of Vorthan warriors, they heard the steady rhythm of human weapons fire. "He's winning," Veltar said in amazement. "Of course he is," Amy said. "That's what humans do. We survive. We adapt. We never give up." "But why doesn't he talk?" "About these things?" asked Corton. "Why doesn't he tell us about his battles?" Amy looked up from her patient. "Because that's not who we are. Jake's grandfather taught him that the loudest soldiers are usually the ones who've seen the least fighting." "His grandfather?" "Henry Morrison. He fought in the Vietnam War on Earth. He taught Jake that true warriors don't boast about their battles. They just do what needs to be done." The alien crew members were beginning to understand. All those stories. They had mocked the warriors who fought impossible odds, the soldiers who never surrendered, the heroes who sacrificed themselves for others. They weren't myths at all. You want to know about human myths? Amy said, finishing with her patient. We call them history. The door to the emergency shelter opened. Jake Morrison stepped inside, his armor scorched and damaged, but his expression calm. He carried his pulse rifle in one hand and a Shadowclaw warrior's weapon in the other. Engine room is secure, he reported to Veltar. But there are more boarding parties on decks 4 and 6. The alien commander stared at Jake in amazement. You ... you defeated them all? I did my job, Jake said simply. The Shadowclaw Regiment, Veltar said. The most elite warriors in the galaxy. You fought them alone and won. Jake shrugged. They weren't that tough, Amy smiled. That was exactly what Jake would say. No boasting, no drama, just a simple statement of fact. How many were there? Asked Zixina. 8 in the engine room, Jake said. Maybe 12 more in the other sections. And you're going after them alone? Unless someone else wants to volunteer. The alien soldiers looked at each other. They had spent months mocking human stories, dismissing them as fantasy. But now they were seeing the truth with their own eyes. I'll come with you, Veltar said suddenly. Jake looked at him. You don't have to. Yes, I do. Veltar stood up, his 4 hands checking his weapons. I've learned something today. About humans, about courage, about what it really means to be a warrior. What's that? That the quiet ones are the most dangerous. Jake nodded. My grandfather would have liked you. As they prepared to leave the shelter, the alien crew members looked at Jake with new eyes. They saw not just a quiet human, but a living legend. Someone who embodied every heroic story they had ever heard. The truth about humanity was finally being revealed, and it was more incredible than any myth. The main hangar bay of the Starwind was the largest open space on the ship. Normally, it held fighter craft and cargo shuttles. Now it was a battlefield. Emergency lighting cast long shadows across the metal floor, and the air was thick with smoke from damaged equipment. Jake Morrison stood at one end of the hangar, facing the largest Shadowclaw warrior he had ever seen. The alien was almost 8 feet tall, with black armor covered in battle scars. His name was War Master Krikstal, leader of the elite regiment that had boarded the ship. So, Krikstal said in heavily accented English, you are the human who killed my warriors. I am, Jake replied simply. Impossible. Humans are weak, soft. Your people tell stories because your reality is too pathetic to face. Jake said nothing. He held his pulse rifle ready, but his expression remained calm. I have studied your species, Krikstal continued. You have no natural weapons, no armor, no enhanced strength. You are prey animals pretending to be predators. Maybe, Jake said, but I'm the prey animal who's been killing your hunters. Krikstal roared in anger and charged forward. His massive form moved with surprising speed, energy weapons firing from both hands. Jake dove to the side, rolling behind a damaged shuttle. The War Master's weapons tore through the metal like paper. He was stronger and faster than the other Shadowclaw warriors Jake had faced. This was the enemy's best, their ultimate weapon. But Jake had faced ultimate weapons before. He came up from behind the shuttle, firing precise shots at Krikstal's joints and weapon systems. The alien's armor was thick, but Jake knew how to find weak points. He had been fighting for his life since he was 20 years old. Krikstal's left weapon sparked and died. The War Master threw it aside and drew a massive energy sword. The blade hummed with deadly power, capable of cutting through almost anything. You cannot hide forever, human, Krikstal called out. Face me like a warrior. Jake stepped out from behind cover. He had dropped his pulse rifle and now held only his combat knife. The blade was made of simple earth steel, barely 6 inches long. Compared to Krikstal's energy sword, it looked like a toy. You choose to die with honor, Krikstal said, sounding almost respectful. I will make it quick. The War Master swung, his energy sword in a wide arc. Jake ducked under the blade and moved forward. His knife found the gap between Krikstal's armor plates. Sliding between the alien's ribs, Krikstal stumbled backward, dark blood flowing from the wound. He looked down at the small knife in amazement. Impossible, he whispered. My armor is impenetrable. Your armor has weak points, Jake said. Everything does. Krikstal attacked again, this time more carefully. His energy sword cut through the air where Jake had been standing. But the human was already moving, flowing around the alien's attacks. Like water dot, this was what Jake had learned from Earth's long history of warfare. Humans didn't win by being stronger or faster. They won by being smarter, more adaptable, more determined. Krikstal was powerful, but he had been trained to fight in a specific way. Jake used techniques from a dozen different human fighting styles. Boxing footwork, knife fighting from the Philippines, grappling from Brazil. The alien couldn't predict what would come next. Jake's knife found another gap in the armor. Then another. Each cut was small, but they were adding up. Krikstal was bleeding from multiple wounds, his movements becoming slower. What are you? The War Master gasped. I'm a human, Jake said. We're the species that survived ice ages, plagues, and wars. We're the ones who turned a death world into a home. Krikstal swung his sword again, but Jake was ready. He caught the alien's wrist, using Krikstal's own strength against him. The energy sword went flying across the hangar. Jake's knife found the gap in the alien's neck armor. Krikstal fell to his knees, his eyes wide with shock and something that might have been respect. Your legends, he whispered. They are real. They're not legends, Jake said quietly. They're just history. Krikstal fell forward and was still. The hangar bay became silent, except for the distant sounds of the space battle outside. Jake picked up his pulse rifle and walked toward the exit. He had work to do. There were still Vorthan ships out there, and his crew needed him. But he stopped when he heard footsteps behind him. Veltar entered the hangar, followed by most of the alien crew. They stared at the scene in amazement. A massive Shadowclaw War Master defeated by a human with a simple knife. How? Veltar asked. Practice, Jake said. No, Veltar shook his head. It's more than that. You're not just a soldier. You're something else. Jake looked at the alien commander. I'm exactly what I said I was. A human doing his job. But the stories we heard about your people are all true, Jake finished. We've been trying to tell you that. Dr. Amy Rodriguez appeared at the hangar entrance. Jake, we're getting reports from the other ships. The Vorthan fleet is retreating. They're afraid. Afraid of what? Asked Zixina. Amy smiled. Word spread through their fleet about what happened here. A single human defeated their best warriors. Their entire command structure is in panic. Veltar walked over to Krikstal's body. The massive War Master looked smaller in death, no longer the terrifying force he had been in life. He was their greatest fighter, Veltar said quietly. Undefeated in over 50 battles, and you killed him with a knife. I had help, Jake said. Help? I don't see anyone else here. Jake was quiet for a moment. My grandfather taught me that every human carries the wisdom of those who came before. When I fight, I'm not alone. I have the knowledge of every warrior who ever lived. The alien crew members looked at each other. They were beginning to understand something profound about humanity. The stories about warriors holding mountain passes, said Corton slowly. About soldiers who never surrendered. About pilots who flew suicide missions. All true, Amy said. Every single one. But why didn't you tell us? Asked Zixina. Why did you let us mock you? Jake walked toward the exit, But he paused to answer. Because we don't fight for recognition. We fight because it's the right thing to do. And because, Amy added, actions speak louder than words. The ship's communication system crackled to life. All hands, this is Captain Campbell. The Vorthan fleet has withdrawn from the system. The colony is safe. Damage control teams, report to your stations. As the crew began to disperse, Veltar approached Jake one more time. Morrison, the alien commander said, I owe you an apology. No, you don't. Yes, I do. We mocked your people. We called your history fairy tales. Jake looked at him. What? Do you think no? I think, Veltar said slowly, that humans are the most dangerous warriors in the galaxy. And the most honorable. Jake nodded. We're just people doing our job. Your job is saving the universe, apparently. Our job is protecting those who can't protect themselves. Jake corrected. Same as yours. Veltar extended one of his 4 hands. Jake shook it firmly. Would you teach us? Veltar asked. About human fighting techniques? About courage? Courage can't be taught, Jake said. But techniques can be shared. As Jake left the hangar, the alien crew members remained behind. They looked at each other with new understanding. The quiet human they had dismissed as ordinary was actually extraordinary. But more than that, they realized he wasn't unique among his species. Every human on the ship had similar stories. Maybe not as dramatic, but forged in the same crucible of adversity that had shaped their entire race. Later, in the observation deck, Jake stood looking out at the stars. The battle was over, but there would be others. There always were. Amy joined him at the window. The alien crew is asking questions about Earth, she said. About our history, our culture, our methods. Good, Jake said. Maybe they'll understand. Used better now. Do you think this changes things? Jake was quiet for a moment. It changes their perspective. Whether that's good or bad remains to be seen. What do you mean? Fear can be as dangerous as ignorance, Jake said. We don't want them to be afraid of us. Just respectful. Respect is earned, Jake said. Today was a good start. Amy smiled. Your grandfather would be proud. He'd say I was just doing my job. And he'd be right. They stood in comfortable silence, watching the stars. In the distance, the lights of the mining colony twinkled peacefully. 2 million people were safe, because one quiet human had stood up to impossible odds. But Jake Morrison didn't think of himself as a hero. He was just a soldier doing what soldiers do, protecting others, no matter the cost. The myths about humanity had been proven true, but to Jake, they had never been myths at all. They were simply the story of his people, a species that had learned to survive on a dangerous world and had never forgotten the lessons that survival taught. The quiet warrior returned to his duties, ready for whatever challenge came next. Because that's what humans do. They endure, they adapt, and they never, ever give up.